This is a full body mobility routine that you can take at your own pace. Begin with shoulder circles, about 20 repetitions. You can go backward or forward or a combination. Feel the motion through your shoulder blades as well as your shoulder joints. And be sure to maintain steady breathing as you do these circles. So about 20 repetitions, and then we want to warm up your neck by taking it in full flexion. You can move it slightly from right to left while it's in flexion, then full extension. Hold each position for a few seconds. Then repeat the same thing, so full flexion for a few seconds, and full extension. Then you can move into rotation to one side as far as you can go, and then all the way to the other side, and then full lateral flexion to one side and to the other side, and try not to let your shoulder hike up on either side. If you feel your neck is warmed up to some degree, you can take it through full, slow, controlled circles. So in one direction at first, this would be clockwise to begin with. If you feel any areas of restrictions or stickiness, you can take your time through those areas. Continue to maintain steady breathing. And if you feel uneasy doing these full circles, you can just repeat the first stretches of going forward and backward and rotating and going through lateral flexion. So here we're doing the 3 circles going the other way, so counterclockwise. Next, we'll warm up our shoulder joints as an isolated movement, so taking one arm through a full circle going up in front of you and back. Take your time with these and keep your trunk facing forward, and try to keep your arm as close to your side as possible. About 10 repetitions is what you want to aim for. If you can't keep your arm too close to your trunk and it has to go further out away from your midline, this is okay. Over time, you should be able to bring it closer to your trunk as you take your arm through these full circles. So approximately 10 repetitions on the other side as well. Taking it up in front of you, above your head, and then behind you, and bringing it back down. Again, as close to your trunk as possible while your trunk is facing forward. Try to keep your head facing forward as well. So with about 10 done on both sides, we can do the same thing, but with the arm going back first and coming forward. So one arm at a time, same principles, and you can keep your other arm in front of your abdomen or even behind your lower back as a reminder or cue to keep your trunk facing forward. About 10 on each side. As you maintain steady breathing, try to keep it at a regular rhythm. So 10 forward circles on each side. Next, starting with your hands in front of you, swing freely and gently backwards, symmetrically. About 10 to 20 repetitions here, just to further warm up your entire shoulder region, including your scapulae and trunk. Be free and breathe steadily as you do this. Then clasp your hands and fingers together and roll each wrist through a full circle, one to the other and back and forth, taking each wrist through full flexion and full extension. This is excellent for preparing your wrists for other mobility work, as well as warming up your forearm muscles and your elbows. Then we'll move on to warming up our hips. So standing hip circles, 5 circles in one direction with your feet about shoulder width apart. Full circles, really feeling this in each hip. And then 5 circles going the other way. Then repeat these. So 5 circles going the initial way. You can do these with your feet slightly wider apart if you'd like, which will target slightly different areas of your hip joints as well as your groin area. And then 5 the other way. And take your time through any areas where there may be restrictions or any stickiness. Next, we'll move on to knee circles. So knees and feet together, palms on your kneecaps. Bend your knees slightly and take them through small circles, 5 of them in one direction. And then 5 in the other direction, maintaining steady breathing. And then repeat these. So 5 in the first direction. And then 5 more in the other direction. Next, we'll get on the ground and we'll warm up our ankle joints. So one leg at a time, we'll work on plantar flexion, where you keep the top of your foot and toes on the ground, and you lift that knee up towards your chest. It's normal to have your trunk rotate a little bit to that same side. You'll feel a good stretch through the front of your ankle and the front of your foot. In this position, your ankle is maximally plantar flexed. So about 5 repetitions, and then repeat on the other side. 5 repetitions of plantar flexion. You want to fully relax your ankle joint so that it goes through the best possible stretch. Now, if you feel up for it, you can do both ankles at the same time by having your hands on the ground on either side of you and lifting both knees up towards your chest. If this is too much for your ankle joints and toes, you can just repeat another cycle of one leg at a time. Anywhere from 5 to 10 repetitions is effective. Next, we'll work on dorsiflexion. So the key here is to bring your heel as close as possible to your groin area, but to keep it on the ground, to hold on to your knee with your arms in your chest right up against your thigh, and to rock forward on that ankle With the heel staying on the ground, you'll feel a good stretch through your lower calf region and also induce dorsiflexion through that ankle joint. Repeat on the other side. Keep that heel on the ground, tucked in close to your buttock, and then really rock into the thigh of that lower extremity. And then repeat for one more cycle. So about 5 repetitions of dorsiflexion. 5 to 10 is fine. On the first side. And then another 5 to 10 repetitions of dorsiflexion on the other side. Having optimal dorsiflexion helps improve balance and also helps to ensure that you don't sustain any unnecessary injuries while you're in action, be it walking, jogging, or running. Next, we'll work on our wrists, and we'll begin on a wall, so pressing our hands against the wall with our body leaning slightly towards the wall, elbows straight, hands slightly lower than our shoulders, and then hands slightly higher than our shoulders with the backs of our hands against the wall. Again, elbows straight. You can do tiny little mini pulses in each position. And then again, hands higher than our shoulders, but our palms against the wall, wrists fully extended, tiny pulses. You should feel this in your ventral forearms. And then hands turned inward and downward to whatever degree possible, hands slightly higher than your shoulders, elbows straight, tiny pulses. This targets slightly different areas throughout your wrists and your forearms. And then hands about the same height as your shoulders, but push your hands away from the wall, keeping your fingers against the wall. And you can rock back and forth. This works the metacarpophalangeal joints, which become restricted in many people as we age. So a solid stretch through this area. Elbow straight. About 10 repetitions. And then on your fingertips, it's really the pads of your fingers, not the very ends of your fingers that are against the wall. Keep your fingers nice and straight and strong, and tiny little pulses, the tiniest of push-ups in this position. And then with your fists against the wall, you're going to unfold one fist at a time so the back of that hand touches the wall, and then bring it back into a fist and go back and forth from side to side. And if you're up for it, you can do both fists at the same time. So uncurling the fist into a flat hand and back into a fist. And then still in fists, you can go ahead and with your fists slightly lower than your shoulders, go through abduction and adduction. You don't have to put a lot of body weight into this. Just take your wrists through these deviations, sometimes called radial and ulnar deviations. For all of these wrist exercises, anywhere from 5 to 10 repetitions is fine. Now you can repeat all of these on the wall, or if you feel that you can handle more, you can get on the ground on all fours. And begin with the first stretch, so your hands straight down from your trunk, palms against the ground, and just gently rock forward. You're inducing a little extra extension through your wrists. About 5 to 10 repetitions, maintaining steady breathing throughout. Then reverse your hands so that your hands are actually a little bit in front of your shoulders, and rock backward for about 10 repetitions. So your palms are flush against the ground, elbows are straight, and you're feeling a good stretch through the ventral aspects, the front aspects of your forearms, and inducing good flexion, extension of your wrist joints. Then put your wrist through flexion, so the back of your hands flush against the ground, and rock backward approximately 10 repetitions. Keep your elbow straight. You will feel this through the dorsal aspects of your forearm muscles. Okay, and then turning your hands inward again with your fingers pointing downward and toward the midline. Rock backwards gently. Try to keep your elbows straight. It's a little bit harder on this one to target some different areas of the forearm muscles and your wrist joints. 5 to 10 repetitions. Next, we'll get into fists again and uncurl one fist at a time to have the back of the hand flush against the ground. It's harder to keep the elbow straight here, but try to really induce mobility through the wrists. It's a highly unique movement, very beneficial. And then the ulnar and radial deviation, or the wrist abduction and adduction. You don't need to put too much of your body weight into your wrists here. Just take your wrist through as much deviation as possible to each side. So about 10 repetitions of that. And then hands flush on the ground again. And bend your hands where the fingers meet the rest of your hands, so the metacarpal phalangeal joints, and rock forward slightly when you're just on your fingers or digits. So you're inducing good extension through your metacarpal phalangeal joints. And then same thing while on the pads of your fingers. So not the ends of your fingers, which would not be functional, but the pads of your fingers. This develops good strength through those fingers and improves the health of the interphalangeal joints. Next, we want to start on our pelvis and have our feet out in front of us and rotate to one side, so both hips rest on the ground, and lean forward in that direction. Then lift our knees up and rotate to the other side. So one side goes through external rotation, the other goes through internal rotation. And by bending forward with the strong core, we induce more mobility through the hips, mainly the front side hip. So we want to rotate back and forth a few times. Gentle pulsing or rocking will help induce more mobility through the hips, and then try to keep the hips spread apart actively for a few seconds. Then, staying upright with our trunk, swivel back and forth. So one side goes through external rotation while the other goes through internal rotation. Just a couple of repetitions, and then one hip at a time to isolate it. The goal is to take your knee close to the ground on either side. Two to three repetitions on each side. And you can continue this if you'd like, but if you feel that you can support more of your body weight, you can actually lift your pelvis off the ground and do one side at a time, really trying to bring the heel up so it points towards the ceiling with external and internal rotation. But if this is too much weight for your upper extremities, especially your wrists, you can always do this with your pelvis on the ground. Or go back to a few more repetitions of going back and forth and leaning with your trunk in one direction to get more of a stretch through the pelvic muscles. So overall, you will have done anywhere from 10 to 20 swivels of internal and external rotation of both hips. Next, we'll go through cow-cat. So this requires you being on all fours. Cat is extension. And with cow, it's full flexion, where you really push into the ground with your hands. With extension, bring your head up as far as it'll go, and your pelvis as well, to do its full extension through your spine. Take this as slow as possible and try to feel this movement through every vertebrae of your spine. After about 3 cycles of going very slow, you can increase the pace if you wish, for a total of another 10 repetitions. Continue to breathe steadily as you do cow-cat. If your wrists start to feel sore, you can sit back and let your wrists rest, and you can even turn them in small circles just to shake them out. It's a good idea to do this after a full 10 repetitions of cow-cat. This is why it's good to work on wrist mobility before you do this type of work, where there's a lot of pressure on your wrists. And when you feel ready, you can go back to the all fours position to do spinal skipping rope. This is where you turn your spine in a full circle around a central axis. About 3 circles in each direction, 3 to 5. Your hands and your knees don't move from their positions on the ground. Imagine an axis from the top of your head straight through the middle of your pelvis. You're trying to turn your spine in a full controlled circle around that axis. If you'd like to do even 10 repetitions in each direction, it's very beneficial to spinal mobility. Next, you're going to move to your back to work on rotation of the spine. So get comfortable on your back with your knees bent and your feet flat on the ground, and then alternate in going from side to side with one leg. You can use the arm on the side that you're turning to help with the rotation by pulling down slightly on the outside part of the thigh that's coming over. Just take it as far as you can comfortably go, and the other hand can actually be used to further accentuate rotation by pushing slightly on the pelvis. Next, you want to lay prone and take one leg over onto the opposite side and touch that foot on the ground while keeping your arms outstretched to your sides against the ground. To view it at a different angle, you want to aim for, again, about 10 repetitions with both of these rotation stretches. Focus on going slowly and controlling your movement and maintaining steady breathing. You'll also find that your bicep and elbow area gets a nice stretch while you do this. And then we're going to go back to working on extension with a bit of rotation. So on your back, with your knees bent up, feet flat on the ground, and then you're going to reach up above you with one arm and try to touch the ground above your head. And do the same thing with the other arm and rotate back and forth or alternate back and forth. Nice and controlled at first until you really feel you have mastery over this movement. And then you can increase the pace as long as the movement is controlled. Really focus on extension and a bit of rotation there of your spine, trying to keep your feet relatively stable on the ground and maintaining steady breathing. And now let's return to being on our lower extremities facing forward. We'll spread our legs as wide as we can comfortably go with our toes touching, and then lower our upper body to the ground slowly, keeping the soles of our feet in contact with one another. The goal here is to slowly and gently pulsate the feet down toward the ground and then let it rise again to go back and forth. This helps to promote good hip abduction as well as a bit of hip external rotation. Aim to do anywhere between 5 and 10 oscillations. And then come on back up in the same position, but you can spread your feet apart. Now gently rock your pelvis forward while your knees stay resting on the ground in this position. About 10 pulsations, really feeling the stretch through your inner hips. You don't have to do too much movement here to feel good hip abduction and hip rotation. Okay, so once you're finished with that, you can come up to all fours again, and we will do rocking cobra to work on extension. Keep your elbows nice and straight, really extend that spine, and then go back into resting pose, and you can shift a little bit from shoulder to shoulder to feel flexion through your shoulders, and alternate back and forth between these two states. So rocking cobra and resting pose. And you can aim for anywhere between 5 to 10 cycles of these two positions. Be sure to maintain steady breathing as always. And when you're done, you can get up on your lower legs, then put your hands behind you on your heels and gently rock your pelvis forward. About 10 pulsations to further work on extension throughout your entire spine, as well as to stretch your hip flexors. And then onto one of our final ones. Want to get back on your pelvis, on your hands and on your feet, and we want to raise the pelvis up as far as possible into a table pose. And once there, rock gently forward a little bit, and then come back. Alternate between table pose, rocking forward, and then coming back. This works multiple areas. Shoulder extension, a good stretch for your biceps area, good for your core, good for hip extension and a bit of spinal extension. About 10 repetitions, really trying to make a table along the length of your trunk and your thighs. And then you want to move onto your back for our final stretch, which is to stretch out the posterior portion of our shoulders. So laying back, then rotating over with one arm so that our upper body lies over the other downside arm. You should feel a stretch in the posterior portion of the shoulder of the downside arm. And just rotate that hand back and forth, which helps to mobilize the muscles in the back of the shoulder region. Go ahead, do the same thing on the other side. So roll over onto the downside arm and then rotate that hand back and forth. You should feel this in the back of the shoulder of the downside arm. About 10 rotations or so is a nice target. And that's all. You've worked on mobility of all of your major joint areas. Well done. Thanks so much for watching. If you haven't already, please subscribe to our YouTube channel for more suggestions on how to improve your mobility and health. And for our most recent self-care suggestions, please use the link here to subscribe to our newsletter. All of this helps us produce more useful content. Thank you and see you again soon.